Good day, class. Today we will tackle the continuation of our lecture, which we left last time on the uh, second part of agribusiness subsystem, the input subsystem. As what we have discussed last time, there are various inputs in in this particular subsystem. We have discussed last time on labor, seeds, and we also discussed something about fertilizer and farm machineries. And more specifically, we also have discussed during the last lecture on uh, about irrigation or irrigation and drainage. Now, today we are going to continue with the lecture on still on the agribusiness input subsystem, and this is still on the continuation of the other inputs in the agribusiness subsystem. So as we continue, before you have also understood that inputs, basically inputs, the input industry in the agribusiness is heavily dependent on import. Now, the next input that we're going to discuss is on agrochemicals. Now, what are agrochemicals? Examples of agrochemicals are actually insecticides, fungicides, herbicides, and these are chemicals or inputs that we can consider risk reducing input. That's why people would like or farmers would like to apply pesticides in order to be able to assure or ensure them of harvest. Otherwise, mahurot sa pest, pests and diseases ang imong crop, then you won't harvest anything at all. So this is really a situation where it is very important in a way to the farmers, in as much as it will reduce the risk of not being able to harvest anything. So the agrochemical industries actually are dominated by foreign brands. Now these are actually dominated by foreign brands, and in the Philippines also the major users of agrochemicals or crop protection products are actually crops like Cavendish banana, mango, onion, cabbage, asparagus, and from across these different crops, we haven't even mentioned about pineapple. Pineapple also make use a lot of agrochemicals. No, then who are the key players in the agrochemical industries? You have the Bayer Philippines, Novartis, Jardine Davis, and then you also have some traditional systems. That is, these are uh, the for example the wholesaler. You have uh, the retailers, and even, for example, the distributors and uh, some of the uh, retailers along the line that produces or that distributes agrochemicals. We also have direct sales to a large users. There are key players in the, but basically it's dominated by the big players in the industry, the foreign players who imports a lot. Based on the most recent data gathered during the utilization of crop protection is basically 51% insecticides. Okay, 51% insecticides and 21% herbicides. Uh, Only about 14% for fungicide, and the rest are actually distributed to various uses, which only accounts for 14%. So we can safely say that we use a lot of insecticides. Now, agrochemical industries are used by crops such as rice, constitutes 3 million hectares using agrochemicals. For corn, about 3.2, and then for pineapple, about 67,000 hectares of pineapple and 27,000 hectares of plantation area are actually the ones benefiting or making use of agrochemicals. You can just imagine the amount of toxic material that is dumped into these different crops, hectares. Now, those are the some initial background of agrochemicals. Now, the agrochemicals also is kind of regulated under the certain agencies of government, which we call the FPA, Fertilizer and Pesticides Authority. That's actually regulating the use of chemicals or even the importation. So the next input that we need to tackle is on the farm machinery. Now, this farm machinery is a tool or an equipment used for agricultural mechanization. Now, very importantly, farm machines and equipment are actually used by various or along the various activities of the farm production. Could be farm production or land preparation, could be harvesting or primary processing. Now, the prerequisite though is partner the prerequisite to and a partner of industrial progress in the use of farm machinery. Now, power sources include human, animal, and mechanical, but basically, farm machinery makes farm production and processing more efficient, and also uh, it makes labor more effective. Now, the use of farm machinery and for crop establishment and crop care are actually some of the uses for uh, farm machinery and equipment. Harvesting and post-harvest handling can also be mechanized, and even transporting of supplies and products. So, in other words, farm machinery is not only limited to limited to land preparation, but it goes into a lot of other uses along the various activities of the farm operation. So, in the farm operation, farm machineries can improve or increase productivity. It reduces drudgery, contributes to intensive cultivation, and even there is uh, the farm machinery could also address labor shortages brought about by shift of agricultural labor to agro-industrial labor. In other words, in cases where there is shortage of labor, mechanization can actually be very useful and be very cost effective. No? So, in terms of increased productivity, it reduces human drudgery. For farm effectiveness, it also is being applicable or being used for to address uh, shortage of inputs like labor and about a shift from labor intensive to agro-industrial labor. Now, what's the characteristic of farm mechanization in the Philippines? Now, the characteristic, the very important characteristic of farm mechanization in the Philippines is that there is no our our local manufacturers are concentrated on the the equipment that actually being driven by engines. In other words, if it is a hand tractor, the desk plow could be uh, fabricated or manufactured here in the Philippines, but the prime mover is actually imported, and that's the problem because the prime mover is the most expensive part of farm machinery. Now, in terms of utilization of uh, utilization of machine power, we are behind in terms of our Asian neighbor. Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea have about 1.5 to 5 horsepower per hectare, while Philippines is only about zero point 0.7 horsepower per hectare. So it's a very far utilization of mechanization of machines. It's very important to think about in terms of opportunities for improving the farm productivity through mechanization. Now, Filipino farmers also demand machineries in terms of how it fits into their farm practices. Now, the difficulty there would be most farmers in the Philippines are actually, or most farms in the Philippines are actually fragmented, and the farm size is relatively, on average, very small. So how can you mechanize a farm that is so fragmented and is the farm size is also very small? So it's really kind of non scale neutral. That means to say, it's it's difficult to mechanize when your farm is only very small, because when you buy machines, when you invest in machineries, it would turn out to be making the cost of production very expensive. No, so production growth in small machines grew by 50% in the last 5 years in the Philippines, but only to a certain extent. The major source of inputs of farm machineries are actually or is actually Japan. Now, in the Philippines, there is what we call as a an association, okay, that specializes on fabricating and manufacturing farm machineries. We call them the AMDA, or the Agricultural Machineries Manufacturers and Distributions Association. So, AMDA is almost like a cartel of agricultural machinery manufacturers and distributors. Okay, so most commonly, both items by farmers in mechanizing their farms are actually power tillers, threshers, shellers, and pumps, engines for drawing water into the farm. No? Now, who are the key players of the farm machinery in the Philippines? Well, Kubota is very obvious. No, it is really one of the major suppliers of tractors and prime movers. Alpha Machineries. You also have Cato International, and you also have Tramat Mercantile, and there's a host of other establishments distributing farm machineries in the Philippines, but none of them is made in the Philippines. It's all imported. No, so in in the Philippines, the cost there are various issues in farm mechanization. There is low level of mechanization due to high import cost. Who would invest on machines that are imported and expensive? It's really something, and we have to, whenever we mechanize a farm operation, we have to think about a a a good balance between employing manually and investing on machines, because the moment you invest on machines or capital intensive operation, you will displace labor, and when you will displace labor, it might create unemployment. Okay, it might create unemployment, and that would be a problem in the economy, especially if the machines are not properly used or has a huge idle capacity. Then it will turn out to have a more expensive cost of production. So local manufacturers have difficulty in competing with imported products due to high tariff on materials and supplies. If you fabricate something in the Philippines, we actually have to import the spare parts, and importing that will cause you to be slapped with a huge tariff on materials. Now, with huge tariff, you will end up making a machine that is an expensive one. Okay. Now, there are various types of farm machineries also. You have the two wheel tractor, and then you have also the four-wheel tractors and rice threshers, corn shellers, pumps, and there's also what we call as carabao drone, uh, small machines. Also with sprayers, greenhouses, tissue culture equipment, and even nets for orchid farms. No, these are the various types of farm equipment that are actually also uh, being used by most farms across different commodities. Okay, so take a look at this data in 2018. You have these different machineries breakdown in terms of number used and purchase. So you have, these are the machines that are commonly used: harrow, plowing or plow, and then sprayer and tractor. With this, the tractor, for example, is also used for land preparation. And even in Region 8, in 2018, you have also the same trend. Okay, what can we see from here from this particular data? It means that it's kind of obvious that most machines used by farmers are actually intended for land preparation. Post production, very very uncommon that the farmers will use more machines. It's really very common that the machines are only used for land preparation. Okay, take a look at this data. From this graph, you have the black one, which is very dominant. What is that shall I say, bar graph? That bar that is colored black actually are plows. And then the gray one is you have sprayer and harrow is blue. So you can really see that it's dominated by machines that are used for like land preparation. So hanggang doon lang ang ang mechanization ng ah, farm production in most areas in the Philippines. So that means what? We don't have we are not mechanizing the post production and even processing part or even logistic, no? We are not mechanizing, hence we are still lagging behind in terms of competition from other countries. Okay, take a look at this. What is this graph? This is a bar graph of like a selected cacao farmers in Eastern Visayas. We had a study on really trying to understand and maybe try to uh, diagnose whether farmers are ready for the technologies under Industry 4.0, or maybe using automated and uh, you know self-driving sprayers, self-driving for example plow, and self-driving harvester. These are very advanced kind of equipment, but already in operation in other countries, like for example in Taiwan, in Malaysia. These are in operation. Self-driving sprayer. So the drone will just fly and spray the field, unmanned spray equipment. But in this particular study, you will notice that most of them, particularly in summer, for example, technology such as that is, according to them, not relevant to their operation. Okay. Now there are those like for example areas, some provinces where they are actually considering to use that, but they don't have the skills to operate that kind of machine. Okay, so another is if when we ask them in terms of like, are you are you interested to invest on any of the different farm operation on machines or technology related to Industry 4.0? Now, the the answer among in most farmers across the region is that probably in the next 5 years they would think on investing on this particular technology, but as of this time, majority of them find it very unlikely that in the next 5 years they will invest on technology or mechanization that is geared or identified or classified under the Industry 4.0 technology. Okay, so that is what can we deduce from there? It means that in our even in our region, because that data is from our region, we are lagging behind in terms of mechanization. Now, our uh, our data is that uh, Philippines in the current survey is very very far from what China and South Korea is mechanizing. South Korea and China are mechanizing their farm, no? In terms of the number of horsepower per hectare. Now, looking again into the data for Region 8, now assessing what sort of level of technology are they using. This is already 2021. No? Now, across province, you can see in this table that mostly the equipment used are manual type of equipment. Only very few use semi-mechanized, and better yet, fuel or electric driven machines. Most are actually carabao and manual type of operation. So that is the farm machinery industry, still dominated by importers. And the other type of say for example, input is irrigation and drainage. Now irrigation is the application of water, the management of water to increase farm productivity. Okay, that is irrigation. And irrigation is usually accompanied by drainage facility to avoid water lagging. That's the status of irrigation development in the Philippines. Well, in the Philippines, there is about 3 million, 3.13 million of irrigable area. But how much is actually irrigated? What is irrigated is only about 1.4. It's less than 50% of the irrigable areas. So what does it mean? We are we have so much to catch up in terms of irrigation development, no? So by with irrigation, it will improve crop production or improve crop productivity. Just like what we did in northern summer. The technology across different locations are the same. We just vary the length of time where water is available. How did we do that? By creating dikes, paddy field, creating dikes, just to contain the water for for 7 more days after a heavy rain, contain ang tubig using the same technology, the same whatever practices, thus the water itself has was able to increase yield by more than 100%. But what did the farmer say? Mahubya man iton sir. Diri kami magsinugad kay waray kami waray naman kami trabaho pag magtapon sila, mag-asa sila sa rice farming. So they're very rational because where will they get the the money to feed the family when during the growing period no alternative employment at all, no? So except habal-habal, or they will go to Manila and find employment there and leave their rice farm, no? So once they know that the rice is already ready or the pala is already ready for harvest, they will go home and then harvest there, and then the cycle goes on and on. So that means it is proliferating or even aggravating the problem of poor agricultural practice because of poor or very inefficient water management. Now in the Philippines, there are major reservoir of like of water, no? That is, these are dams that are really containing water for irrigation and also for household use. The Magat River irrigation, you have the Upper Pampanga irrigation system, and the Angat Maasim River irrigation in Bulacan. But you know what? Some of these some of these dams or reservoir, some of them or even most of them during times of drought, the priority is the urban dwellers in Metro Manila. If there are if there are excess water, then and only then they will bring that to the rice field. But if the shortage is severe, population is the priority, not agricultural crops. So that's the problem because during drought, where plants also need water, it won't get that much water they need. But the priority is the urban dwellers of Metro Manila. So that's really something that is challenging our irrigation development. No? So the next input is agro-industry processing. Okay. The next input is inputs for agro industries. Input for agro industries. The other one is input for direct farm production. Here, input for agro industries for processing. No, so first is for crops that are used for inputs for agro processing. Like for example, corn. Corn is the main ingredients for feeds and for other use like alcohol and other use. Now, corn is really also an input, not just a staple crop. Okay, so about the gross value gross value, the gross value of agricultural output amounted to about 8.49 billion at current price. But the production, okay, the gross value of production was 450 billion at current price. No? So that is that is something that really is uh, very very challenging to imagine. Crop subsector share in the agricultural output is 46.92%, and yet we are not growing as expected, uh, as expected in our, for example, uh, current farm production practices. Now, in terms of crops, there are annual crops where you have grains, vegetables, fruits, and root crops, ornamentals, and these are producing all sorts of vegetables and fruits. And also, these are also crops that are like being used for further processing input to industrial crops. And other than that, we have perennial crops. Okay, coconut, which is for an industrial uh, crop for the production of coconut oil, sugarcane for sugar, and then you have fruit, nuts, vegetables, and so on and so forth, and such and so. Now, another after crops, crop as an input to agro industries, we also have livestock as an input to agro industries. What particular industries are we talking? We're talking about livestock subsector. Cattle, carabao, goats, and other and hogs. They are inputs to meat processing. Really different types of canned meat products. And the prospect of this industry is very bright. Only that we produce very little in terms of domestic production. Most even pork, we import a lot of pork. Even Leyte, no, even Region 8 is importing pork from Mindanao. No, can you imagine? How come we cannot produce pork in Leyte for our own population? Very simple. We just have to change our practice, our culture. No, what is our culture? Our culture in Leyte or even in Region 8, we domesticate, we raise pigs for various occasions. What are these occasions? For enrollment, for fiesta, for Christmas, and for birthdays or whatever special occasions. Now, these occasions only happens every year, once a year. So what happened if you are uh, raising pigs, maybe a few heads of pigs for the fiesta? The fiesta is almost like one year away. So your pig or your hogs will be growing for 1 year. And you know what? When you sell that 1 year old pig in the commercial market, that won't command a good price. Why? Because the back fat is very thick already, and the customer wants a wants a meat that is with very thin back fat and very thick, lean meat. No, so what does it mean? What do you mean by that? It means that we need to sell young hogs or young swine, maybe 3 or 4 months old, or even 3 months old. Why? Because the technology also this time only because only requires few months to grow, and you can get the desired weight already. No, before you raise hogs, you feed them until 6 months, and they'll weigh up to 100 kilos or 120. But now, with only 3 to 4 months, that before raising hogs up to 100 kilos, that's going to be 6 or 8 months to raise that level of weight. Or yeah, but this time with that new technology and new breed, you only have to feed them until 3 months. You can get 80 to 90 kilos already. So that's far more efficient than what it was before. No. So the prospect of this industry is very bright. No, maybe uh, some of you have what uh, tasted a very crispy chicharron from Karkar. What do you think? The pork used there in Karkar, in the province of Cebu. What do you think are what do you think are those materials? Like for example, the raw material, the pork fat that is being used. These are not produced in the Philippines. These are imported because if they buy it from the Philippines, very expensive. So that's why they'll buy this from Europe, where where the people there or the consumers there do not eat fat. So ang fat export sa Pilipinas, barato ra gyapon pag abot diri sa ato, no? And then gihimong chicharon, daghay na nga hubog sa chicharon kay sundan man dayon og kuan kanang naay tuba or wine. So that's the situation. We could have raised hogs that is relatively very competitive and also process other byproducts out from swine. But our pork is in short supply in the Philippines. No, so these are the different types of hogs grown. You need to have a good breed of hogs so that you can get a good price and quality at harvest. Animal production inputs include the following: breeds, feeds, animal health products, and farm structures. Okay, so these are the different animal production inputs. Okay, animal production for agro industries. What about animal breeds? So you have a good uh, collection of or names for players in the hog industry. You have uh, Erich Wizohan, and then you have Cabantris, and then you have Group Grimo. Okay, Henrik's Genetics. These are producing the Hyper Philippines breed. What are these? These are importers, and these are foreign companies selling hogs in our country. No? So this hybrid or these good breeds of hogs are actually imported. No? Only very few in the Philippines, if there are, who are really breeding our own, or developing vaccines even for hogs. No? Now, in sometime before the pandemic, I was invited to attend a what a summit or a congress of all veterinarians in the Philippines. Now, according to that data, when I attended that congress, the the current ratio the current ratio of hog population and veterinarians in the Philippines is more than 10,000. One veterinarian for about 10,000 hog population. That's very big. That's very huge. The target should be one veterinarian for every 1,000. Okay, but it's still very far to reach that particular target, desired target. So, in other words, there is still a huge room for improvement in the hog industry. For broiler, for layer, all uh, breeders or developers of these with different types of highly productive breeds for broiler and layers are actually coming from abroad. No? So you have here a local farms that are breeding also swine, international swine genetics, and you have also farms that are breeding also hybrid hogs. Only very few of them cannot even create a dent in the market. No, so still a huge room for improvement in as far as animal breeds is concerned. Now, genetically modified inputs also for crops or even animals. It's uh, very it's a wide space, huge room for improvement because it is it is an industry where only very few dare to venture. Why? Because there is a taboo, a a normative thinking or a myth from a lot of people that eating a GMO, a genetically modified say for example crops or fruits or whatever, will kind of make you a what? A giant, or it will, you might become a dwarf individual. These are myth. Myth does not hold scientific explanation. But through the years, we've been eating this organism, and then we have not we have not really changed our physical condition. Much less, we have not acquired disease. In fact, many of us grew fatter and fatter every year. So, in order to ensure sufficient supplies of feed, Asian and Eastern countries, we have to go into how to modify, how to make genetically modified inputs. Okay? Don't you know that there are already this time, there are already hamburger patties that are not, that are grown on test tubes, nara, or petri dish, nakahulman na petri dish. Through biotechnological advancement, you can the meat portion can cell divide and grow into a regular texture meat. And then when you cook it, it's meat minus the aroma of the milk because it's genetically modified. Who cares? You put spices and other additives, you won't even recognize that it is a genetically modified, say for example, hamburger patties. No, so it can be done like that. No, because when you mix that with the spices, you don't like the smell of the milk anymore or the aroma. You want to have the a spicy flavor already. So that's that genetically modified meat can do a lot of solution to problems of food shortage. Now, another is feed as for animal production inputs. So it provides support to the livestock and poultry industry. Now, from all the ingredients in feeds, corn or yellow corn constitutes about 50 to 60% for feeds. And then, of course, in 70% of total production cost for feed milling actually is coming from these ingredients. No, so you have in the Philippines, we grow corn in areas like Cagayan Valley and also in Cotabato areas, but the production is not enough. We are still in shortage of yellow corn. We import a lot of the yellow corn. In the Philippines, there are really huge, like unmet demands for yellow corn and even for white corn. No, there are feed mills that are even financing farmers to plant yellow corn just to secure markets, pero only very few takers actually. No, so next time I will show you a data, no, or say a certain result from our study where there is really a potential for, like a potential for going into yellow corn production because the market is very active, provided you are using the right technology. Who are the top producers? What regions are top producers of yellow corn? NCR, Southern Tagalog, Central Luzon, and even, for example, this time Cagayan de Oro, and of course, certain part of Cagayan de Oro and Iligan. Why? Why is NCR na daghang mga feed mill in NCR or even in Batangas in Southern Tagalog? Why are there so many feed mills there? Who are the feed millers? General Milling, Swift, Vitarich, Purina, Universal, Rubina, and then Pure Foods and even San Miguel. These are the big players. Now, most feed mills are located in these areas, Batangas, Cagayan de Oro, and even in NCR. Why? Simple reason, imported ang yellow corn close to source of raw materials because when the ship is docked there, dali rait, ang logistics very cheap. Why in Cagayan de Oro? Very far from Manila. In Cagayan de Oro, there are 13 feed millers, different companies operating in Cagayan de Oro area. Why? They are positioning themselves close to Bukidnon, the main producer of corn and yellow corn in like in say in central Mindanao, in central Mindanao. No? So that is the main reason actually. There are top three imports for corn: cornmeal, soybean meal, or main for feeds: cornmeal, soybean meal, and fish meal. No, fish meal for feed ingredients. Dako gi kay ni imported yun nato ni cornmeal coming from soybean. We don't grow soybean in the Philippines. There are packets of maybe plots planted to soybean, but it's only used for domestic purpose, but not for commercial. That's why we import a lot of soybean. No? Who are the key players in the uh, say feed milling industry in the Philippines? As I said, uh, San Miguel, Swift, Pure Foods Corporation, Vitarage, URC, and of course Purina. No, Purina. So you have uh, the Purina and Superfeeds are actually new entrant, but the the big five are actually the ones very elaborate in terms of operation. Now, what are the key issues in the feed milling industry? Of course, availability of yellow corn or corn, and then low productivity. If you are planting corn, the productivity is very low. You have 1.5 uh, metric tons per hectare average. That's still very high compared to yellow corn production in for example, in Leyte and Biliran. What we have is less than 1 ton average production. And then with that particular yield level, production is production cost is very high. Net loss is the regular thing to experience in that sense. Now there is high transportation and marketing cost also, very common issues. And then uh, that's why we kind of substitute low price products such as wheat, resulting to low quality feeds also. So that means the feed milling industry is highly dependent on import. Successful integration and improvement of input marketing links in the feed milling industry is very important concern also. No? Now, we have to maintain a good and very stable production for uh, different some of most of these inputs, so that our input industry, especially feed milling industry, will have to float in terms of uh, a lucrative business in the Philippines. No, feed millers really also wanted to like avoid contamination of feeds. That's why, very importantly, the quality of feeds, the quality of ingredients to be used should really be something that is free of contamination. That's why paduol gid sila sa sources of raw materials, so that no more spoilage can happen, or no spoilage, minimal to none, uh, non-existent spoilage to happen to spoil the quality of the inputs. Unlike in the Philippines, transporting is really a problem. Once it is not properly dried, there goes the problem of low quality inputs. Therefore, the feeds will be very also of low quality. So there is a need for more investment in the input industry in the Philippines, even for seeds and other inputs. No, so it's very important that we need to improve on our capacity to uh, produce this kind of inputs. Also, another is breeds of swine. You have landrace, you have hyper, etc. We need to improve on this particular inputs. Very importantly, animal health product is also a very important inputs to livestock production and for agricultural production. For livestock production, we have biologics and also, for example, vitamins and biologics. Biologics that is such as those products that are that are used to address certain kinds of or cures and to treat or to cure certain types of illness. So what do we need to do? At least we can manufacture our own drugs, animal drugs. We should also be able to manufacture our own vaccine. But the thing is, we are importing them. We are dependent on importation. So there are 97 players. No, there are 97 players of various health and animal products in the Philippines. Can you imagine 97 players? But look, if you try to make a closer look at them in terms of their functions and uh, performance, most, if not all of them, are actually ma- marketeers or in the marketing sector. In other words, nangangkat ra ba og produkto from abroad gibaligya diri sa ato. They are not actually manufacturing it here in the Philippines. Much less, we don't have the technology to develop our own animal healthcare products. And also, we don't have the capacity to develop our own vaccines and other biologics. So what happens? We import them and sell it to the Philippines, like aggravating our dependence on import, making us very fragile in terms of like our situation. If, if price abroad will increase, we will surely be affected. So you have there other players in the animal health industries. So Pfizer is always there, San Miguel Healthcare, and there are other players. No, only very few are actually what are actually uh, say for example uh, local producers, but most, if not all, are actually marketers. Okay, so uh, there is really going across inputs, as I have made mention from the previous lecture until now, across inputs. There is a continuous dependence on imported materials. Okay, and then another thing, there is a perceived or even a a uh, a situation, a lingering issues of underdeveloped local industry across types of inputs. Local prices are highly vulnerable to peso dollar exchange rate. Why? Because we import a lot of these different types of input. May it be fertilizer, may it be seeds, may it be agro-industrial input, health products, biologics, breeds, etc. All these are imported. There's no problem with importation for as long as we can really improve our production. But the thing is, we are importing, but only very few of our farmers use them productively. Some will not even will buy a good breed of swine, but they will feed them with uh, swill feeding. Ano man ang swill? Pasaw. No? Mga pasaw, mga biya sa kusina. What happened? Masakit ng baboy because doing, you are accustomed to swill feeding. SWILL, swill. That means mga pasaw na, mga biya sa kusina. No? So, the input industry is, or the input subsector is actually dominated by few and large firms controlling the dynamics of the industry. And this is, and this, and the input industry also is threatened by high supplier bargaining, meaning to say, because the players are actually from abroad, we are only importing, and these players are huge firms, more huge multinationals. They have a strong bargaining position. So we are only what, at the receiving end. Whatever they dictate, we follow. Because what can you expect? We don't produce our own. We don't have the technology. So that means we are only users, not producers. Okay. So with that note, no, with that note, it's very clear that across inputs, what kind of inputs? Seeds, fertilizers, agrochemicals, farm machineries, uh, for agro industries like livestock, crops and livestock, and even for animal health products and also biologics, and even for other types of inputs. They are all dominated by large firms, and of course, we are heavily dependent on import. So, uh, if that is the case, then it is a challenge that it's about time to develop our own input or make something that will at least improve our productivity in terms of the use of these different types of inputs, no? Different types of inputs. There are already progress in terms of, for example, fertilizer. Uh, so we diversify in terms of using more into organic, other than like imported inorganic materials, but it's still a long way to go. So with that note, that almost like summarizes our topic on the input agribusiness input subsystem. So what are the different types of inputs? There are many of them. You have inputs like land, labor. You have also like machineries, feeds, irrigation. You have agrochemicals, and you have yeah, those inputs for agro industries, no, for processing. You have also animal health products. You have breeds of both livestock and poultry, and several others for feed milling. All these different types of inputs are part of the whole gamut of industries in the agribusiness input subsystem. With that note, class, that ends up our lecture. And please review them, because I will upload this in our Moodle classroom. Review them for our assessment time. No? So with that note, as I said, thank you, and uh, God bless all of you.